Okay, I've got another different style video for you guys today. So normally, obviously, I'm solving some maths problem or giving you guys some advice regarding MAT, TMUA, that sort of stuff. Today, I'm going to be doing the same thing, but joined by Hamish. Both him and I studied maths at Oxford University, did the MAT, and obviously did the interviews as well. And so we're here just to kind of shed some light on that because I know there isn't that much information online available regarding that. So just here to kind of answer the most kind of frequently asked questions if you like, and also just like the general concerns that you may have and questions you want answered. And if there's anything left unanswered, just shoot it in the comments below and I will respond. So I was at Christchurch, the best college, and Hamish, I think there's like a little shed at the back of Oxford University called like Queen's College or something like that. Basically Oxford Brookes that Hamish went to. And we both studied maths together, and yeah, now living up the perks of having Oxford University on our CV. How's it going, Hamish?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to having a little chat about interviews. It'll be a bit of a walk down memory lane because it's kind of coming up 10 years since I did my interviews, so that's a bit of a scary milestone.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. It's yeah, it's a scary milestone for sure. I think also it's if you I mean maybe even more scary when you put yourself back in the shoes of well, when a 17-year-old Hamish who was applying for maths. I guess that being said, like what was it that kind of made you go, you know what, I want to apply to study maths, but me more importantly, study at Oxford, like arguably the one of the best universities in the world.
Yeah, I think I kind of knew from quite a young age that I thrived in kind of math lessons at school. I always found those the most enjoyable. I clearly did quite well in any kind of I don't know, just like lessons class. It seemed like I kind of got things a lot faster in that subject than other people, and then than I did in other subjects. So it's quite clear to me that that was a something that I would want to do in kind of further education. I guess specifically as like why Oxford, or I guess why Oxbridge generally. I think I kind of always did really well and was like, well, there's no reason why I shouldn't kind of aim as high as you can, really. I was fortunate enough that my dad had done a degree at Oxbridge, so I know obviously not everyone will be as fortunate to have that kind of role model, but I kind of felt like it was possible from that go, and I had a lot of my teachers at school kind of always pushing me to kind of aim as high as I can, and I kind of really enjoyed it as well. So it didn't feel like a an obstacle or like a chore to work hard in my kind of math lessons and yeah, Oxford particularly, like I think when it came to like choosing between Oxford and Cambridge, I guess the MAT being before all the interviews and feeling like, right, if I get an offer, just need to pass my A levels. I know that that's no mean feat in itself, but I didn't like the uncertainty around step being in the summer and having to still feel a little bit uncertain about my place at Cambridge if I got one.
I see, yeah. I think I empathize on both those fronts. And I think lots of the viewers will as well, where at school they maybe feel that they aren't challenged as much as they want to be. And that's probably one of the main reasons they've gone, they've heard of Oxbridge from however many years ago. And they know that it's like the top level, the best universities in the UK. And if they feel they aren't being challenged enough at school, like where are you going to get challenged? Well, at the best institution. So I think I certainly empathize with that. I had shared a similar story and also that was also kind of one of the reasons I applied for Oxford over Cambridge as well. There were other reasons. I just did genuinely just prefer the city, and when I went to go and visit both. But yeah, certainly having the daunting step exam as a 17-year-old, and you go, oh my God, I didn't even understand these questions. And it's also a very different type of exam as well, being very long as well. But that's really good to hear. And I think most people, at least from the students that I've helped and kind of have similar reasons for when they would choose Oxford over Cambridge. Well, that's normally one of the things that comes up and it's normally a deal breaker. I guess going back, so obviously when you apply, very similar to how it is now, you submit your UCAS with your personal statement. You do the MAT in mid-October, mid-November. So as of recording, the MAT is this time next week. And so similar time when we did the MAT, mid-October, whatever it was, when we did it. And then obviously you hear back from the MAT slightly, a few weeks later, and you get invited to interview. So nowadays it's near the end of November. I guess in your preparation for the MAT, how much of that preparation do you think was also quite useful going forward into the interview?
I think that there's definitely some overlap in the kind of skills that you're developing by preparing for the MAT. I think you're probably quite used to doing past papers if you're preparing, you've done GCSEs, you're getting ready for your A levels as well. The MAT is obviously more similar types of skills to that. Maybe the questions are more challenging, challenging you to use your knowledge in maybe slightly different ways to what you're used to. I guess the interview is like a whole step further than that because you're maybe going to get some kind of problems where you might already have the skills to solve them, and you're being challenged to use them differently, like in the MAT. But you might also get topics that you are by design going to be completely new to. And I think that part of it is not something you're really preparing for the MAT for because there is still a bit of a syllabus, right? And the interview feels like everything's on the table. They could ask you anything. You have no idea what they might ask you. So that's a little bit of a step. And then there's the extra bit of it being a bit of more of a conversation, or you've got somebody there live, and you're not just kind of writing the answer, or like you can spend some time thinking about it and come to the right answer and then write it down. You have to kind of talk through your approach, and I think that's something that's a very different skill, I'd say, and one that maybe people going through their GCSEs and going into sixth form to start their A levels maybe aren't familiar to having to do that, because a lot of the skills you're taught are written mathematical skills, and you're not as good at articulating how you're solving a problem, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think like the way I always think about it and I always describe is in your the first 18 years of you learning maths, all of it is assessed through silence in an exam. And the interview is very opposite, where you're encouraged to talk out loud, well, sorry, think out loud, sorry, and explain your thoughts, explain your reasoning. And I think also those skills that not just obviously preparing for the interview, but then obviously going through Oxford and doing very similar things in the tutorials. So just as a bit of context, the interviews are very similar to like tutorials or supervisions if you're applying to Cambridge, where it will be just very, very discussion based. So at Oxford, when you get a problem set, you go to the lectures, you'll get a problem set, and then you go away in your own time, try and solve those problems, submit them to your tutor. Then there'll be a tutorial where you go along and you discuss the problems. And it's kind of similar to an interview. Obviously, the small difference being in the interview, you don't see the problems ahead of time, but it's very similar that you're encouraged to discuss. And I think it builds so many skills in terms of just not just confidence, but also it really forces you to ensure you understand. And kind of a big merit or something that I really go by, philosophy, if you like, is you don't know something well enough until you can teach it to someone else. Or you can't say that you truly understand something if you don't have the ability to teach it to someone else. And so I think that interview is a really good way of forcing students, or to force you, if you're preparing for an interview, sorry, it really forces you to truly understand something. Because if you can't explain it, if you can't talk about it, if you can't delve into why something is true and explain your approach, your reasoning, you just don't know it well enough. And I think that is one of the key things in a way that they're looking out for in an interview. Okay, cool, amazing. So I guess let's imagine we fast forward a week's time, you've done the MAT. What's Hamish, 17-year-old Hamish's thought process? Let's say you've walked out the MAT, you're feeling mildly confident that you might get an interview. Obviously, you can never be certain. What's the plan? What did you do between then and interview day or interview offer?
Yeah, I think yeah, I don't know how confident I was. I think I kind of came out feeling like okay, but it's a very hard paper, and I think you're used to, I know, A levels where you're almost expected to not drop any marks at all if you can, whereas MAT it's expected that you're not going to get every mark. The questions are much harder, and there's
For
more time
sure.
pressure and everything. So I kind of didn't really know how it would have gone, really. But I guess between then and finding out I had an interview, I don't know if I did that much prep. Not that I'd recommend that approach to everyone, but I think I still had my kind of regular, you still at school, you're doing your
Child
regular.
genius, I think.
Hmm?
Just a child genius, you knew all
Yeah,
about.
yeah. I don't know. I think maybe I was a bit naive about it, and that didn't probably hit me that I would actually have to prepare for an interview until I'd got that. I didn't want to kind of maybe not waste effort, but I don't know. I still not felt like I was applying on a whim. I felt like I had a reasonable right and a chance to apply. But I didn't want to assume I'd gone into or like curse my luck by preparing for it loads and then finding out, oh, I'm now really disappointed because I've actually put some effort and time into this.
Sure.
I think maybe I did want to like speak to people who'd been to Oxford more to work out what the interview would be like if I got one. So there were people in my family who I'd spoken to before, or at school. Some of my teachers had experience with other students who'd applied or themselves. I was fortunate that my school offered a mock interview as well. So while I didn't actually get offered that until I had my interview confirmed, I think I kind of was trying to work out what those would be like and do a little bit of research myself on what an Oxford math interview would be. And I think until I'd come out of the MAT, I don't think I really realised that an Oxford math interview wouldn't be like I don't know, a job interview where they ask you questions and you answer the questions like you were basically going to do a math question
Yeah.
like it's an exam paper. You're going to give you a problem and you're going to solve the problem on a whiteboard in front of them or on the page. Obviously, now it's digital, just on a kind of touch screen. I don't think I quite realized that until um, I had the interview where I started to think about the interview. So it's definitely a very different step and something I would encourage students to kind of, yeah, look into as soon as you can, really, after that MAT. I know, obviously, priority before you've done the MAT is put all your preparation efforts into doing as well as you can in that. But I think once you kind of give yourself a bit of a break, you've worked hard for that MAT, but then do a little bit of research just to work out in anticipation of potentially getting an invitation to interview about what that might entail.
Yeah, I think I had a similar kind of experience myself where I was like, I know I'm good at maths, but I think, or maybe slightly differently, is I didn't really have lots of people around me or anyone really. That I had one teacher who did engineering, which, I despise at Cambridge University, which is even worse. But he was like my only kind of source of like intel into Oxbridge, and he helped me a lot, to be fair. But like I didn't feel like I knew I was good at maths relative to the people in my school, but I knew that that wasn't,
Yeah,
the kind of sea of was a big fish in a small pond sort of thing. I didn't know how good I was in comparison to others. So I think that maybe did add to kind of the nerves and the uncertainty, which obviously that adds to the stress, which you probably don't want in the run up to an interview. But I'm pretty sure like my once I'd finished the MAT, I'm not really too sure what I did in particular to prepare for the interview, but I do remember just being kind of a little bit lost, a little bit unsure, and a little bit like I'm not even sure what the interview entails. And I think actually that's one of the biggest misconceptions I now see as a maths tutor is that maybe parents or even sometimes what teachers will assume that an interview at Oxbridge is like an HR interview or an interview when you're applying for a job. So when you apply for a job, obviously it's things like, well, what skills do you have? Give me your three biggest weaknesses and, things like this. Whereas, as you say, in an Oxbridge maths interview, it's right, here's a maths problem, let's solve it together. And there's lots of different types of problems they could give. There are certain problems where, they will just give you a problem and they let you explore it. There'll be some where it starts off quite easy and it builds up. There'll be some where it's a bit of back and forth. And what generally happens is you might try something, it might not work. They'll point you in the right direction, or maybe ask you what if you want to consider this. And there's a whole skill, almost an art to it as well. And I think that's one of the things that isn't really talked about. And in my opinion, I think it's actually quite unfair because there's lots of people who are probably very good at maths, but just because they don't know and probably very well suited for Oxbridge, but just because they're not aware or they're not too clued up on maybe what it entails, they maybe put at a disadvantage or adds to the uncertainty. Whereas at least with the MAT, you can look at all the 20 years of past papers, and you can look at all the stats, you can look at all the examiners' reports, and you have that same access to those as everyone else does. But sometimes with interviews, it can feel a little bit different as well. And also, yeah, I think I see a lot with a lot of my students as well. So once they've done the exam, so the TMUA was just a few days ago, and lots of people are doing that for Cambridge, if they're applying for economics or computer science, or they're just doing it for their other universities, and they're not too sure whether they'll be invited to interview or not. So they're kind of in this weird honeymoon period. Where it's like, well, do I wait till November? But in my opinion, November's too late. Why wait till then? Because if you do get an offer, you're going to be like, oh, why didn't I prepare these last few weeks? But yeah, there's lots of, I guess, things to be mindful of. But I personally wish there was a lot more information out there in terms of what you should be
yeah.
doing between the MAT and the interview, but also what things are useful for you per like individually. Maybe you already are really good at maths, but you struggle thinking out loud, or maybe you're already really good at speaking, but maybe you have holes in your mathematics knowledge. So I guess I'm just kind of going through your timeline here. So you did the MAT, you then finished the MAT, and you started to prepare for your interview. And then did you get an email? Did you get a letter? How did it work for you when you got invited to do your interviews? Do you remember?
I think my interview invite was an email. I think my offer when I got one in the end was a letter. But it
Mhm.
was I think everyone was over reading it. Obviously, after my interviews, they used to be in person, right? So we get invited to go in Oxford for a few days. I know they're now. I think since COVID gone fully digital.
Mhm.
But yeah, I was in communication with other people I'd met at interviews. There was a lot of different people getting uh, told about their offer or their lack of in different ways. There was a lot of reading into that. I wouldn't put too much emphasis on that because it might be more uniform now. But yeah, I got the email, I guess, and then kind of obviously you get that initial excitement of must
Mhm.
have done well enough, I guess, between my application and my MAT
Mhm.
score, whatever that was. Must have done well enough. And then I think it's the kind of sudden shock that you're like, oh, I now actually have to get ready for this, and I don't think I am. And similar to what you were saying before, I don't think I am aware of what I even need to do. And there's not that many resources out there. Maybe 10 years on, there's more. But I think maybe I agree with you. Definitely, when I was going through that, I didn't really feel like there was much out there, and there's a lot of misinformation from people who you would normally rely on as a student, who are just making guesses about what it might be like, and they don't actually have that kind of accurate knowledge. So I think I started trying to look for opportunities to do mock interviews, whether that be through um, through opportunities that were presented to me by the school, or through any other avenues I have. I mean, I know that itself is hard, and some people are in more fortunate positions where they have more people they can seek
Absolutely.
interviews with. But yeah, that was it. Try and get experience in that. I think I kind of realized like this is now basically going to be I need to practice as much as I can at kind of being given a problem live on the spot and being able to talk through that. And I think that is something that you just don't ever really do, as you say, until you go into that interview or until you start preparing for it.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, if someone watching this can only take one thing away from what they should, sorry, take one thing away from this video that will help them prepare, I think mock interviews is probably one of the biggest things. I remember my first mock interview, I was more nervous for that than my actual interview. And I think it's because doing that mock interview shattered all my nerves. Like I was like, oh, okay, it's actually not chill, but it's a lot more like, okay, cool. I'm having a conversation about something I really enjoy and passionate about with someone who is really smart. It's actually quite enjoyable. It's almost quite refreshing because I want to be challenged. I want to be not the smartest person in the room. And when it comes to maths, in school, most likely the people watching this who are applying to Oxford, Cambridge, they're probably the smartest mathematician in the room at school, and they want to be, challenged and pushed. And I think that's one of the things that makes it a very enjoyable experience. I think that was one of the things that I was advised, and I continue to advise students is enjoy the interviews because it's, I mean, obviously, even regardless of whether you get into Oxford or Cambridge, you'll end up at a university which has professors that are smarter than you. But being in a room in a very, it's two interviewers, yourself, obviously now it's remote, but it's the same idea of you know that they are 10 times smarter than you. And that is, I don't know, there's something quite beautiful about that. I think even at university, when I'd go into tutorial and, I would have a question where it's like, nah, he doesn't know the answer to this. This is too difficult. And he's like, no, no, they know the answer. It's an unreal level of like geniusness, so to speak. Okay, cool. So let's actually talk about the interview, if that's okay with you. So, as you say, when Hamish and I were doing interviews, this was when it was in person. Now it's all online. But most of the interviews themselves haven't changed, apart from them being over Zoom or Teams or whatever, instead of being in person. But the types of questions they ask, the way they assess you, all these sorts of things are the same. I'm not going to ask you I'm not going to ask you specifically what your interview questions were, but what did you think the like once you'd gone into the interview, what do you think? Or what were you thinking? I guess like, when you went into the interview room and you started to answer their questions, I'm sure you did feel a bit nervous, but like what thoughts were going through your head?
Yeah, I'm first of all glad you're not going to ask me to recall my questions. That definitely isn't something. I remember like my mistakes and things that went wrong, or things that I was worried about for weeks on end afterwards until I found out I got in. Um, I think I was, yeah, nervous, but I think that's natural. I don't think it's a bad thing. You've got to try and enjoy it. I know it is a scary experience because you feel like there's a lot of pressure on the interview that you're going into, but you've got to try and be as confident as you can. Try and talk as not talk as much as you can, but try and make sure you don't go too quiet and silent. Even for like someone who's quite extroverted and chatty normally, that's it's the nerves definitely get the better of you, and the pressure to try and perform at your best is gonna make you a bit respond differently and be a bit more insular than you normally would be. I think I first of all, yeah, they were straight into the maths questions. I think one of the three interviews I had, they maybe like brought my personal statement up and were like, "Ah, so you play the piano?" And I was like, "Yes." And I was then they were like, "Right, cool, move on." I was like, well, that was just like a formality of like, just yeah,
Uh,
we did receive your personal statement. We have seen it. We don't really care more about your MAT score and how you do right now, I guess. I think also while the mock interviews I think I did two, were helpful in terms of forcing me to practice articulating. I think the questions that my mock interviewers they were still not misguided, but they weren't as hard, I don't think, as the ones I got in the real interview. They weren't on topics that I was less familiar with, and I think they were more challenging in the real interview. Um, I think I was good. I improved since getting the interview offer, interview invite, at articulating problems I knew how to solve or I knew the methods, and I'd become better at describing how I go about solving a problem. But I maybe was still struggle to talk through my initial thoughts to something completely new to me or a problem where I didn't know the set method to get it, or that knew that the set method wouldn't work. The method that I'd learned when revising for an exam didn't work in this instance, or I don't have a kind of intuition about immediately. And that's a real thing that you're gonna have to, I guess, try your best to prepare for. But just talking through yeah, a completely unfamiliar topic is a very strange thing to do when you don't even know where you're going. You start talking and you're like, this is
yeah,
what I know, this is what my intuition would tell me. And you feel like you're just kind of delaying, procrastinating actually solving the problem. But that's kind of what they want from you. They want you to at least demonstrate your understanding it, show that you're kind of your brain is processing and you're thinking of things that maybe would work in other situations that may or may not be useful now. And yeah, I was feeling nervous for sure, and I think I still enjoyed it. Three interviews went very differently. One felt okay, one felt awful, one
yeah,
felt somewhere in the middle. But yeah, I think they're quite intense. You know, they are smart people. Some of them can be quite intimidating. Some of them are much more chatty and kind of like everyday people. But they're insanely smart, as you said, Jamin. They are so obviously
yeah,
way smarter than you, and I think that's quite an intimidating thing. In knowing that they hold the power to let you in or not is something that you kind
yeah.
of have to have to process and move on with quite quickly.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think just on that last point there, it's also kind of important to remember that, yeah, the people who are giving you the interview, those are the people who are going to be your tutor. In fact, so one of my tutors, I remember in Freshers Week, we had like a maths dinner, and a few of us were chatting and be like, "Oh, do you remember, the interview that we had with him?" And I was like, "Yes, I hated I hated that specific interview." But yeah, at the end of the day, the people who are interviewing you are going to be the people who are, decide not only designing to let you in, but also, um, the ones who are going to be teaching you when you're there. So it's also you want to be, it's first impression, right? First impressions always count. So you want to ensure that you make it last, make it count. And I guess, yeah, also you're mentioning like the almost like a culture shock of being not knowing where you're going with a problem, not knowing how to approach it. I think that is what a lot of how Oxford and Cambridge maths works, where it's just much more challenging the maths that you study. But in the interview, or one thing that I think I certainly would have felt, and I probably did during the interview, and maybe you felt as well, was the fact that you don't know. You go from A levels, where, as you say, you're getting 100% in all your exams, and everything's easy, to now you're getting problems where you don't know the answer straight away. Even after 5, 10 minutes of thinking and discussing and trying different avenues, you still might not be, you know, not really know how to attack the problem. And the way the mental image I have is imagine being in like a forest or something, and it's nighttime and all you've got is a torch and you've got to kind of work your way out. You've got to try different routes, different avenues, work out what works. Whereas obviously if it's during the day, i.e. A levels, it's nice and easy. You can just see the light and find the exit sort of thing. Um, that's just a weird analogy I had in my head. Okay, so I guess in terms of interviews, you obviously got your offer in January, then smashed your A levels, and then went on to study at Oxford and lived happily ever after. So, in terms of your interview,
Yeah.
when you were there, so same with me, right? There's a good few of us who lived happily ever after doing the Oxford interviews. after doing, 4 years of intensive maths as well. But
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
talk about
yeah.
that. We skip over those. Uh,
The
so
hard bit, the effort. It's all worth it. It's all worth it,
it's
guys.
all worth it. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
hard.
We're
It's
quite
hard, but
talking,
it's worth
guys.
it.
Uh, so in the run up to the interviews, what do you think was the thing that you did that had the most impact on you going from Hamish with an interview invitation to Hamish with an Oxford University maths offer? What was it like yeah, what was it that you'd done that you think had the biggest impact on that?
Mm. I mean, I guess we've already touched on like mock interviews. I think those were the most useful. I think you need to, no one's going to drive you at this point. You need to be internally motivated to do this. I think, weirdly enough, I know this is a bit step ahead, but the most I found myself really, really wanting to get in was after the interview because I had such a good time when I went to Oxford. I found the interviews interesting and challenging. I'd met so many intelligent people, both the tutors and the other applicants. I'd seen the city. I'd got to stay in the college for a few days. I know maybe the current students won't be getting that same experience, but I think I left Oxford feeling like I really, really want to get in. And I think while I obviously still prepared for the interview, I think I kind of was a bit more nervous of like, oh, well, there's still a very reasonable chance I don't get in. Like, I don't know what the proportion was my year. I think it was maybe kind of 1 in 3, 1 in 4 people who got an interview then get an offer, something like that. I don't know
Yeah,
the stats
roughly, yeah, 1 in 3,
myself.
1 in 4 is normally what it is.
Yeah, so I think I went in a little bit like nervous of like we'll give it a go, we'll give it our best effort, but I think it's very reasonable that I might not get an offer. There's lots of intelligent people both in my school. I think I had, like you said, moments in my life where I felt like I'm better than other people at maths in my school, but that's a very small sample compared to the whole, population of a 17-year-old math student.
Mhm.
But I had no concept of where I ranked in that, and there might be many, many people more worthy of an Oxbridge place than myself. But I was like, right, I've got an invitation to an interview. I've got to put my best foot forward and give it a go. I think mock interviews definitely. I think just uh, yeah, trying to make sure I was as best prepared as possible. And I know that sounds quite simple, so I don't know how to elaborate on it that much more. But you are going a little bit blind, and you are going to be hit with things that you don't expect, and trying to be as ready as you can for that. I think I, I don't know if it like slightly changes the question, but the biggest piece of advice I would say for people now is we've talked so much about practicing talking through problem solving. The interviewer wants to, they're not expecting you to get everything straight away. They're not expecting you to get everything right. Like you will say things that not maybe aren't true. You will make mistakes. You will kind of go down a suggested idea that is maybe valid but isn't the right way to solve that particular problem, and that's okay. They want
Yeah,
you to show you've got ideas to solve a problem. So even if you see a
so,
problem, you're like, I don't know which solution is going to be right, but I have a few ideas. Talk through them. Talk why you might apply one, why you might use the other. Don't be scared of saying something that's either wrong, because sometimes you might have an intuition about a problem that's wrong. Maths can sometimes be surprising. Sometimes what feels like it should be right isn't. And it's okay to say, well, my intuition would say that this is probably going to be the answer, and then you do the workings, and it's not the case.
mhm.
But don't be afraid to say something that later is proved to be untrue, or is you realise you've gone down a route that maybe hits a dead end for that particular problem. So try and practice just kind of talking through everything you're thinking when you're solving a problem, whether you just take a few MAT problems from your preparation or if you have got a mock interview set up,
Mhm.
try and practice talking through everything you're saying and saying, well, we could apply this idea, we could use this method. Like I've seen a similar problem where we could use this kind of
Yeah.
trick. I don't know. Just talk through every idea you possibly have, and talk while you're going down an idea about where you get to. Even if you start to think you're getting stuck, talk about what it is that means you can't apply the method you were hoping to and why that's there, because that will help the interviewer guide you to a solution. And that's what they want to do, because that's what they're going to have to do when they're teaching you. They can hint you more effectively if they can see what it is that you are struggling with. And if you are able to tell them why it is you're not able to get there or why this method isn't working, they'll be able to help you more effectively. I know that was a little bit rambly to the
No, no.
question, but I think that's something I think that is really important. And I think a lot of students are maybe so nervous about saying something and feeling like if I say the wrong thing, they're going to just strike me off the list straight away. But I think you will do a lot better saying lots of things that are not true than saying nothing at all and then just producing the right answer at the end after 5 minutes of sitting in silence.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of that. Like that is really, really true. And I think one bit just to add on to that is it's not a maths test, and people go in with the mindset of it's a maths test. But at the end of the day, you've done the MAT, and if they've invited you to Oxford, sorry, invited you to interview, sorry, they wouldn't invite you to interview if they were 100% certain they were going to reject you. So if you get invited to interview, they definitely see some promise there. But also they've assessed your math skills already. Obviously, in the interviews, they're still assessing your math skills to an extent, but it's also things like how, mathematically fluent are you? How, are you communicating your ideas clearly? Do you have the like, are you, what do you do if you get stuck? How do you approach a problem? What if you vary one of the parameters? What if we get rid of this condition? What if we, and tweak things around? And that's what they're looking to see. How well do you deal with being stuck in the mud, so to speak? Because that's what will happen at university, where you'll learn a theorem and then you want to apply it, but then that theorem might not exactly work because the function's not continuous or whatever, something like that. Okay, yeah. So, and I think, yeah, being prepared, I know it's a bit of a difficult thing to describe, but I think that does help. Mock interviews for sure, kind of maybe knowing what the interview will entail. So, in fact, actually, one of my students brought this up in, just at the TMUA. We had a lesson earlier and just having a chat, how they found the TMUA. And they were saying, obviously, it's done now and they were really happy with their performance, but now they're a little bit nervous regarding the interview because they're not too sure what it entails. And I was like, don't worry, I got you. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be working together. And in fact, that's actually something I thought I'd open up to more students. So I'm actually running an interview preparation program. So if anyone is interested in like developing their skills and then run up to interviews so they can go in prepared. Last year I had 13 students, 12 of them got Oxbridge offers. And so like without sounding too arrogant, I think I know what I'm doing. So if you are interested, there'll be a link in the description below. So hopefully, you can be on a little Zoom call with me next year, and we'll discuss and help the students of next year who want to join and study maths at Oxbridge. But yeah, I guess Hamish, a couple of last questions, if that's okay with you. So obviously, in the interviews, you would have been challenged and stuff. What is it that normally happens if you get stuck? So when you get stuck on a problem, let's say I've asked you, I'm the interviewer, you're the student. I've asked you a question. You seem to make some progress, but then you're like, the method that you thought, you kind of hit a dead end. What generally happens next in an interview?
Yeah, I think this is the thing. I think so. Yeah, the simple answer is that the interviewer will probably try to help you. And first of all, don't panic if they do. They're going to do that. I think people worry that like the number of hints I get, it's like each time they hint me, I'm losing my probability of getting an offer here is going down every single time they speak, and it's not me just getting the answer straight away. They're trying to practice coaching you. They're going to be your tutor if you get in.
Mhm.
Um, and I think they want to see you fully develop and realize a method is a dead end. They won't necessarily want you to go all the way down a really long, windy avenue for you
Yeah.
to realize it's a dead end, but they want you to to realize yourself why a method isn't going to work. So they might stay a bit quiet to start with, but they won't really want to waste time. It's not an effective use of their time to watch you go down an avenue that they know you're eventually going to realize, or maybe you won't, but they don't want you to go down a route where it's going to be the wrong way, the wrong route. So they will kind of steer you if you spend a bit too much time on a method that maybe isn't going to work for this particular problem. That doesn't mean you kind of shouldn't continue with an approach. But I think just be wary that like they're they want you to maybe work out yourself where actually this is feeling like it's getting a little bit complicated or it's not going to work or something. Maybe I should just pause for a second because before I get too stuck in this big algebra or something like that, I need to take a step back and think about maybe why this method might not work. And they might steer you away to another method or might suggest something that prompts you to think of another method. Or they might try and just like give you a hint about why this method maybe isn't working for you to try and prompt you to work a little bit into that direction of like, let's work out why this method might not work rather than focusing on pushing through with it. So yeah, I think hints are useful. They're part of the interview. They're not something that you should be kind of worried about getting or ashamed about getting. It's a good use of their time to make sure
Yeah.
that you're following a method that's eventually going to get you to closer to the right answer. And it doesn't mean that the method you took to start with was a bad idea. Like that's the main thing too. Like it's a valid route. If they thought it was a bad idea, they probably would have shut it down a lot earlier.
Yeah.
They're not going to let you just follow a route that makes no sense and is just completely wrong. So yeah, I think hints are something that they'll be trained to do. And as I say, like if you get stuck, if you feel like you are a bit stuck and you're not sure how to progress, try and talk about what it is that's meaning you aren't sure how to progress. Whether it's like, okay, normally when I use this method or when I used it for a similar problem, I was able to, I don't know, expand this or I don't know, I can't
Yeah.
answer maths for so long, but the
For
method you normally use for a
sure.
problem like this isn't working. Try and explain why that is and why that might mean this method doesn't work, and they'll be able to kind of maybe give you a different idea about how there's a trick that might kind of get you around a step or make it simpler, or they might try and guide you to a different method because you've realized with their help potentially that this method isn't going to work for this particular problem.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. Well, yeah, as I say, they give you hints, and also as you say, they might not give you a hint if you're heading down the right or a direction, and then maybe they want you to realize it's you're heading in the wrong direction. And I think so. Generally, what my advice for students is when they receive the question from the interviewer is obviously they might have some ideas floating about in their head, is to just like lay it out all on the table, and then might have a few different avenues, option one, option two, option three. And for whatever reason, you decide to try and solve the problem via option two. But the important thing is you've laid out the options to your interviewer, so they know all the initial thoughts and initial ways you could have attacked the problem. And let's say you go down option two and it ends up being a dead end. It's I think important to if they don't like interrupt and they don't say, oh, give you a hint, you might go, well, I think it's not. I don't actually think that. Oh, sorry, you could say something along the lines of, oh, actually, now that I think about it, maybe this isn't the best way to approach this problem because actually I can't really solve this equation nicely because it's non-analytic or whatever. So you go take a step back and you go, okay, well, I did have options one and three, and now I actually realize that option three, because now I've worked out that X equals this, I can actually apply option three and get to the answer by calculating Y, whatever it is. And so as long as there's almost like this narration, this like analysis that you're doing, commentary, so to speak, on what you're thinking and what you're the maths you're doing, you're basically at the end of the day, I did say that they're geniuses. The one thing that they're not is mind readers. So in the interview, you've got to kind of paint the picture of what's going on in your head. That's, I think, one of the biggest things they're looking to see is how you think and and the only way that they can kind of really unlock that is by you explaining and telling them what's going on in your head, what thoughts you're having, and how you're thinking about approaching the problem. And if you lay out all your ideas at the start, then you're basically saying that, okay, cool, even if I choose the wrong option, I've laid out all the different thoughts I had, and one of them is going to be right. So then, you're kind of putting a safety net on it. Anyway, that's pretty much all we have time for. But I will ask you one last question there, Hamish. If you could give yourself one bit of advice, you go back, to your 17-year-old self before the interviews. This time, in fact, imagine you're doing the interviews this year round. What's the advice you give to yourself, knowing all you know now?
Um, yeah, I think it's I don't want to kind of sound like a broken record here, but it's a couple of things of like try and enjoy it, try and work as hard as you can, make sure you are as ready as possible. Whatever that may entail for you personally, whatever you think it is. But I think the main piece of advice that I think I wish I did more of is just talking more. Don't be scared to say things. Don't be scared to make mistakes. I said something that was so wildly untrue in my interview, and they kind of just looked at me a bit quizzically and was then kind of like, are you sure that kind of thing? I think I said something like a triangle can have two sides that add to less than the third side, and I was like, I don't think that it can. It's like, can you draw that triangle for me? I was like, no, actually, probably not because I think it exists. But it's okay, like, but to say something, they recognize your stress, they recognize you're nervous, but what they don't want is you to kind of sit and just think away at yourself. They want to
For
talk through
sure.
it. So as Jamin said before, talk through everything that's on your mind. Like speak about, ask clarification questions when they're showing understanding, showing you want to kind of test the boundaries of what the problem they've given you. Talk about methods that maybe could work. Talk about methods that you've used before for questions like this. Talk about just the subject that's being tested. Sometimes I'll be like, if it's a completely new topic, they might be like, "Do you know anything about this?" Be as honest as you can. Say, "Oh, I've seen a little bit in my reading, maybe, but I've never done a question on it." Just talk constantly. That is, it's a conversation. It's not kind of
Yeah.
wait for you to be invited or wait to be kind of probed, and they want you to
Yeah.
just come back to them with the answer. talk through everything you're thinking every single time, whether you think you're going down the wrong route, down the right route, anything that comes to you,
Mhm.
always just speak it out loud. They can't read your mind, but they want to see how you're thinking because it will help them hint you and it will help them see how they can coach you, and they'll see that you're more coachable if you're willing to tell them what it is that you are struggling with, and how they can help you to solve those problems. So yeah, just talk as much as you can about
Yeah.
everything that is coming to your mind when you are thinking about the problem that they've given you.
Absolutely, yeah. Thinking out loud is the best bit of advice. But I can't believe you said you know, if you could go back, you wouldn't sign up to my interview preparation program. That's diabolical.
Yeah, I definitely would have signed up to Jamin Shah's 15-year-old self, his YouTube channel that didn't exist. No, unfortunately, I didn't know Jamin back when I was applying, so
Lucky
he
you.
didn't have this fabulous business to go and sign up to.
Yeah, but I mean, on a serious note, if you are genuinely looking for some support in the run up to interviews, do click on the link in the description below. You can book in a call with me. We can just have a chat to see if it would even be a right fit for you, and also just try and point you in the right direction regarding your preparation. I know a lot of you got the MAT next week, so if you do, absolutely smash that out the park. And yeah, if you haven't got the MAT and you're just starting to prepare for the interviews, best of luck. I'll be producing a bu bunch more content, discussing interviews and how to prepare, all those sorts of things. So stay tuned, and I will catch you in the next one. I'll leave a video on screen where I give you some advice for the MAT. And I just want to say thank you again to Hamish for your time this evening. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. Take care.